Welcome, future accountants and CPAs. Today's session is designed specifically for university students and CPA candidates. We'll break down internal control concepts in a way that's both exam-friendly and practical for real-world auditing. So if you're ready, let's dive in. So let's define first the internal control. Internal control is a process designed to provide reasonable assurance regarding the achievement of management's objectives in the following categories. First is the reliability of financial reporting. Example, the company's internal control procedures include regular reconciliation of financial statements, segregation of duties between employees, for example, those who are handling finances and those authorizing transactions, and a thorough review process for any significant financial entries. So these measures help ensure accurate and transparent financial reporting. This is enabled to reduce the risk of errors or fraud that could misrepresent the company's financial position. The second is the effectiveness and efficiency of operations. Example, an e-commerce company implements internal controls to streamline its order for fulfillment process. This involves automated inventory tracking to prevent stockouts and overstocking, as well as performance monitoring of warehouse staff to ensure they are efficiently processing orders. So by optimizing operational processes, the company can fulfill customer orders promptly while minimizing the excess inventory cost. The third one is the compliance with applicable laws and regulations. So, an example, a pharmaceutical or a manufacturer, for example, a pharmaceutical company, they establish internal controls to ensure compliance with FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, the regulations, no? So this includes rigorous documentation of manufacturing processes, regular quality audits, and proper training of employees to maintain adherence to safety and quality standards. So these measures help the company avoid legal and regulatory penalties, ensuring their products meet the required standards for consumer safety. Okay. Why should you care about internal control? So first, it's heavily tested in the CPA exam. And second, of course, in your career, whether you're an auditor or a corporate accountant, understanding controls will help you prevent fraud and errors. Okay. And of course, it's a key framework, the COSO, Committee on Sponsoring Organizations. Okay, let's talk about COSO framework. The COSO framework is the gold standard. So think of it like a house. Okay. The control environment, this is what you see here on the top. This is the COSO cube. It's also called the COSO cube. The control environment is the foundation. It is about the environment that exists within the organization and includes areas such as values, structures, division of labor, and retaining competent personnel. In short, ethics matter. So this is also called the tone at the top. Okay. The second one, okay, the risk assessment. So risk assessment checks for the leaks. It is about identifying and analyzing internal and external risk and how this should be prioritized. Okay. The third one, the control activities. These are the locks on the doors. Okay. Once the risk have been identified and assessed, okay, it is important to implement controls. So now you see that, for example, the risk assessment. After you analyze the danger, after you think, thorough examine the danger or the problems, the leaks, the loopholes, okay, now you go to the control activities. What are you going to do now? So these ones are like the policies, like the approvals, reconciliations, okay? So these are in a house, it's also called the locks on doors. So once the risks have been identified and assessed, it is important to implement such controls to prevent the risk from occurring. So the next one is information and communication, okay? In order to be able to control and manage the risk, okay, it is important that information and communication work in the organization. So from employees to the management and management to the employees. So if somebody found out that whoever is analyzing this or assessing the risk found out that there are some reportable issues, it has to be reported to the management. And also from the management, from the top to the employees, it has to be communicated as well. And the last one is monitoring. That's your security camera or the CCTV in your house. So it's important to evaluate and follow up all these different components, no, according to the COSA framework to identify changes and possible gaps. So during the CPA exam, there's quite a number of questions because the CPA examiners love this type of questions, no. So please, if you want to nail your auditing theory, you have to master the COSA framework. So again, what's included in the COSA framework? We have the control environment. Second is the risk assessment. Third, control activities. The next one is information and communication. And the fifth one is monitoring activities. All right, imagine a company processes invoices. So we're talking about the accounting systems and internal controls. Good controls mean segregation of duties. Okay, one person will record the journal entry or not just a journal entry, but posting it in the system. Okay, another person will need to approve that entry. So if the control fails, auditors must dig deeper, or there could be more substantive testing. Okay, always remember, weak ang control, that means more testing. Okay, because remember that internal control is supposed to be the responsibility of the management. So if there's a leak, remember the leak in the control process, so you need to do more testing just to check if they are, for example, if the numbers are correct, there's no misappropriation, something like that. So as an auditor, it means more work. Okay. So how do we gain understanding of the internal control process? We can do inquiry, observation, inspection, and walkthrough. Documenting controls isn't just a busy work. It's how auditors understand the process. So on exams, you might get a question like, which method is best for complex processes? So you got to answer flowcharts. So narratives are simpler, but it's harder to follow. Narratives are more on words. Flowcharts is more on visual. So remember that. Okay. Let's go to assessing control risk. This is a CPA exam hotspot, okay? Control risk is huge on the CPA exam. Remember that. So if controls are weak, auditors can't rely on them. So remember this, key points. Control risk equals risk that controls won't catch errors, okay? So they test more transactions directly. Think of it like trusting a broken alarm system. So you check the doors yourself, okay? High control risk, auditors do more substantive testing. Okay. So the same as what I mentioned in my previous slides. So pag alam ng auditor based on the assessment na merong problem or na meron tayong failure on the control system itself. So that means the auditors has to step in, has to do more work, has to do, for example, the balances in the AR and the AP, you have to do that. More samples as well. So if you're not confident with the balances in the accounts payable, then you need to increase your sample. So that means you need to do more work as an auditor, right? So test of controls, how auditors verify. So testing of controls is like a science experiment. Auditors might observe if cashiers count cash sa control activity, or auditors can reperform a bank reconciliation. All right. So there are 4 procedures: inquiry, you ask the employees; observation, for example, you have to watch them work; inspection, you have to check the documents now. If the supporting documents has approval, for example, signed by the, not just by the manager, but signed by the authorized approver. Not because the person is a manager, that means that person is an authorized person. No. In especially for multinational companies, for big companies, the board of directors will need to authorize the officers of the company. So the officers of the company will need to authorize the designated persons who has to approve. For example, operations department, somebody has to be an authorized person there. For example, the marketing manager is not authorized to approve expenses of the production floor or the production area, because that's not his area of responsibility. Okay. The last one is re-performance. It means you have to do it yourself. All right. So tip for the exam: re-performance is the strongest evidence. All right. Okay, documentation, what you must know for the exam. So documentation is your audit trail, right? From the word documentation, there should be a paper document, okay? On the CPA exam, expect questions like, what's missing from this working paper? Key rule: if it's not documented, it means it wasn't done. So exam alert: you must show who performed the work, what was tested, and the conclusions. And also the types of documentation. You have the checklist, memos, screenshots. Okay. All right. Now we're at the end of our tutorial summary. CPA exam mnemonics. Prime: control risk increases, means more substantive testing. Okay. COSO framework: control, environment, risk assessment. These are included in the COSO framework. Risk assessment, remember, the control activities, information and communication, and monitoring of activities. Okay. So I hope you can find time to memorize the COSO framework and the crime mnemonic. All right, now let's go to our CPALET type exam questions. So are you ready for the quiz? If yes, then let's start. Okay, let's start with question number 1. Which of the following is not one of the 5 components of the COSO internal framework? A, the control environment. Okay, remember the COSO framework. Huh? B, risk assessment. C, fraud detection. And D, monitoring. You may pause the video and then have to think. All right. Okay, the answer for question number 1 is fraud detection. The COSO framework, remember, includes, okay, I'll repeat: control environment, risk assessment, control activities, information and communication, and monitoring. Fraud detection is an outcome of the effective controls, not a standalone component. Okay, now let's go to question number 2. What is the primary purpose of segregating duties in an internal control system? A, to increase employee productivity. B, to prevent errors and fraud by dividing responsibilities. C, to reduce the workload of auditors. D, to simplify accounting processes. Okay, you may now pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B, to prevent errors and fraud by dividing responsibilities. So segregation of duties, all right, this is separating authorization, custody, record keeping. It ensures no single person can commit and conceal fraud. So this is a classic CPA exam concept. Definitely it will be there. All right, let's go to question number 3. Which of the following is the strongest form of evidence when testing controls? A, inquiry of management. B, observation of employees. C, inspection of documents. D, re-performance by the auditor. Okay, you may pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B, re-performance by the auditor. Example, redoing a bank reconciliation. It provides direct evidence that the control works. So the inquiry is the weakest as it relies on verbal claims. Now let's go to question number 4. If an auditor assesses control risk as high, what is the most likely impact on substantive procedures? A. Substantive procedures will decrease. B. Substantive procedures will increase. C. No effect on substantive procedures. D. The auditor will resign from the engagement. Okay, you may pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B. Okay. High control risk means controls can't be relied on. So what we were discussing in my prior videos, no? If the risk is too high, that means your substantive work or the work of the auditor will also increase. Okay? Auditors must perform more work, more substantive testing. For example, as what I mentioned before, the confirmation of, for example, more receivables or more payable balances. Okay. Let's go now to question number 5. So which documentation method is most suitable for complex processes with many steps? A. Narratives. B. Flowcharts. C. Questionnaires. And D. Memos. All right, you may pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B. So flowcharts, I mentioned to you, that's more on the visual. Okay. So it's like a map with a lot of processes, with a lot of arrow. For example, is order to cash, make order to cash cycle, for example. So making them ideal for complexity. Narratives is more on wordings. Okay. Now let's go to question number 6. The tone at the top is a critical part of which COSO framework? Okay. A. Risk assessment. B. Control activities. C. The control environment. D. Monitoring. Oh, okay, sorry. Okay, the correct answer is control environment. The tone at the top of the management's integrity and ethical values sets the foundation for all controls, making it part of the control environment. Okay. Sorry about that. I pressed the button quickly, so you were not able to think first. But you can always go back to the question, okay? Let's go to question number 7. Okay. Which of the following is an example of a preventive control? A is bank reconciliation. B, requiring supervisor approval for purchases. C, reviewing exception reports. And D, counting inventory annually. All right, you may pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B. All right, so preventive controls stop errors or fraud before they occur. The best example is this one, requiring approval from an authorized person. So on this one is the supervisor. Detective controls A, C, and D identify issues after the fact. Okay, now let's go to question number 8. What is the primary objective of a test of controls? A is to detect material misstatements in financial statements. B, to evaluate whether controls are operating effectively. C, to prepare adjusting journal entries. And D, to assess corporate governance policies. Okay, you may pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B, to evaluate whether controls are operating effectively. The test of controls check if controls are designed properly and working. For example, verifying that purchase orders require signatures. Okay, let's go to question number 9. Which of the following would most likely indicate a weakness in internal control? A, monthly bank reconciliations. B, the same employee approves payments and reconciles bank statements. C, use of pre-numbered invoices. And D, mandatory vacation policies. Okay, you may pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter B. There's a weakness of internal control here because there's no segregation of duties. All right. Okay, now let's go to the last question, which is question number 10. What is the final step in an auditor's assessment of internal controls? A, documenting the controls. B, testing the controls. C, reporting material weaknesses to management. And D, determining the planned level of control risk. Okay, you may now pause the video to think. The correct answer is letter D, determining the planned level of control risk. So after understanding, documenting, and testing of controls, auditors conclude on control risk, high, medium, or low, to plan substantive procedures. All right, now we reach the end of our topic. So thank you so much for your attention and participation today. Understanding audit risk is foundational to your journey as a competent and ethical auditor. So keep studying diligently and remember that continuous learning is key in this profession. Remember that internal control is very, very important, and it's one of the most loved topic by the CPA examiners. Okay, so if you master the internal control, there's a it's high likely, there's a greater chance that you will pass the auditing theory. All right. So if you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up, share it with your fellow students, and subscribe to our channel for more valuable content on accounting and auditing. So if you have questions, actually, you can comment. You can drop your message in the comment section, and I'll find time to answer your questions. All right, so your support helps us create more resources like this. Thank you so much, and have a good day. Bye-bye.